Ask a room of engineers. Ask a room of engineers a simple question. When you delete a customer's data, is it actually gone? And watch the eyes drop. Gone from the primary database, probably. From the analytics warehouse, the search index, the backups rotating on a 6-month cycle, the processor's mirror, the spreadsheet someone exported in 2024. The DPDP Act asks that question with legal force. Every piece of consented personal data now has a mandated ending, and we flagged it as deleted is not that ending. Today, Erasure, the law's timetable for data death, the test everyone will argue about, the special clocks for the biggest platforms, and why I call deletion the hardest engineering assignment in this entire statute. You're listening to DPDP Daily. I'm Harmeet Singh Kapoor. I've spent my career running large programs and portfolios, the discipline of making complex things actually happen, and for the past few years, I've brought that discipline to India's data protection law. I wrote the DPDP Act Compliance Handbook, From Law to Ground Reality, and this show is that book, opened up one episode at a time. If you're new here, the 30-second background: in 2023, India passed its first comprehensive data protection law, the Digital Personal Data Protection Act. In November 2025, the government notified the rules that make it operational on a phased clock that runs to full enforcement in May 2027. Together, they decide what every company, hospital, school, app, and shopkeeper in this country may do with your personal data and what you can demand when they get it wrong. 15 minutes a day, no jargon, real answers. Let's get into it. The rule first: cleanly. A data fiduciary must erase personal data when the data principal withdraws consent, or as soon as it is reasonable to assume the specified purpose is no longer being served, whichever is earlier, unless retention is necessary for compliance with law, and the fiduciary must cause its data processors to erase as well. 3 components, 2 triggers, 1 exception, and a cascade. Let's take them in order. Trigger 1, withdrawal. We built in episode 17, the tap that starts the pipeline. Today's edition is just the connection. Withdrawal and erasure are one workflow. The stop signal and the deletion are stations on the same line, and architectures that treat them as separate departments manufacture their own gaps. Trigger 2 is the interesting one. The purpose is no longer being served. Notice this trigger needs no request from anyone. It's automatic, running on the fiduciary's own clock. The customer who ordered once and never returned, the account dormant for 3 years, the delivery completed, the contest concluded, at some point the specified purpose from your Section 5 notice stops being served. And at that point, the erasure duty arms itself whether or not anyone asks, which converts a philosophical question, when is a purpose no longer served, into an operational requirement. Every category of data you hold needs a defined retention position, reasoned from its purpose. The framework helps for the biggest players, hold on for that. But for everyone, the discipline is the same: purpose stated, lifetime reasoned, expiry implemented. We keep it in case it's useful someday is not a retention position, it's the absence of one, and it's the default posture of almost every database in the country right now. Now the rules contribution, because the 2025 rules put hard numbers where the Act left judgment, for notified classes of the largest platforms, for e-commerce entities and social media intermediaries above defined user thresholds, and online gaming intermediaries. The framework prescribes a 3-year outer limit. Personal data must be erased 3 years from the last time the data principal approached the fiduciary for the specified purpose, unless she returns or law requires longer. And here's the humane mechanism attached, the one I flagged in our earliest episodes. At least 48 hours before time-based erasure, the fiduciary must inform the data principal. A warning that gives the person the chance to log in and keep the relationship and the account alive. Think about what that pair of provisions does at scale. the dormant account mountains of Indian consumer platforms, hundreds of millions of abandoned registrations holding names, numbers, and histories forever, get a statutory expiry date and a farewell notice. If you operate anywhere near those classes, the 3-year sweep with its notification machinery is a build, not a policy memo, and it belongs on your countdown plan today. The exception next, because it's real and it's bounded, retention necessary for compliance with law. The tax record statutes command you to keep the KYC directions from our legitimate uses episode, the employment records with statutory lives, where a law requires retention, erasure yields for that data, for that period, for that purpose. Two disciplines keep the exception honest. Citation, as always in this series, retained under needs a nameable provision, not regulatory folklore. And segregation of purpose, data retained under legal mandate, is retained for that mandate. The KYC file kept for the prescribed period is not thereby available to the marketing engine. It's in legal cold storage, access restricted to the purpose that justifies its survival. Retention under law is a freezer, not a pantry. And then the cascade cause your processors to erase, which by now you can hum along to. The duty travels down the vendor chain by operation of law. The contracts need deletion on instruction clauses with confirmation obligations and a deletion honored at headquarters while the CRM vendor's copy lives on is a deletion that didn't happen. Ask your processors a blunt annual question. Certify what you deleted on our instruction this year. The silence you may receive is a finding. Which brings us to engineering and the reason for my cold open. Real erasure fails in the same 5 places, organization after organization. The unmapped copy, you cannot delete what you haven't found, which is why every erasure program begins at the data map from the discovery phase. Erasure is where bad mapping goes to be discovered. The soft delete masquerade, the flag that hides a record from the interface while the data sits intact underneath. Concealment is not erasure. The analytics shadow, primary record deleted, warehouse and indexes still fat with the person. The export drift, the spreadsheets, the downloads, the temporary copies with tenure. And the backup problem, which deserves honest treatment rather than slogans. Nobody can surgically excise one person from last month's tape archive, and reasonable practice worldwide has converged on a defensible pattern. Delete from live systems immediately, let backups expire on their documented rotation schedule, and ensure that if a backup is ever restored, the deletions replay before the data goes live again. Write that pattern down as policy, implement the replay, and you have a position you can defend. Wave vaguely at backups are complicated, and you have an exposure. Let me close by connecting Erasure to everything this arc has built, because it's genuinely the keystone. Erasure enforces the notice. The purpose you itemized in episode 15 is the purpose whose ending starts this clock. It completes withdrawal. Episode 17's tap lands here. It disciplines retention, the freezer, not the pantry. And it exposes architecture, the organization that can truly delete one person everywhere, downstream included, has necessarily solved its mapping, its vendor discipline, and its system inventory. Which is why I've said since the social posts that started this whole project. An erasure request is the ultimate audit of your data estate conducted by a stranger. Build for the audit before the stranger arrives. Tomorrow, the ARC reaches the provisions with the heaviest moral weight and the 200 crore tier behind them. Section 9, Children's Data, the under 18 line, verifiable parental consent and how the rules make it work, the tracking and advertising prohibitions, and the well-being standard underneath it all. That's today's episode of DPDP Daily. If it made this law a little clearer, do one thing for me, send it to one person who needs it. That's how this show grows. Everything I covered today, with the templates, checklists, and audit frameworks behind it, is in my book, the DPDP Act Compliance Handbook from law to ground reality. And I post one practical DPDP insight every morning. Find me on LinkedIn and on X and Facebook as well under Hamid S. Kapoor. One important note, this is education, not legal advice. For decisions about your organization or your rights, take proper professional advice on your specific facts. New episode every day. I'll see you tomorrow.